It's June 8th, 2014, and CSX's yard locals at Clifton Forge, Virginia are hard at work. Two GP38-2 locomotives are in charge of today's shunting. These units are equipped with remote controls that can be used to manipulate the train's maneuvers without an engineer being present in the locomotive cab. Clifton Forge marks the starting point for one of CSX's most famous and historically significant lines, the former C&O Allegheny subdivision. Between control points JD Cabin in Clifton Forge, Virginia, and MX Cabin in Hinton, West Virginia, the railroad consists of over 78 miles of steep grades, curves, and roaring locomotives which work hard to deliver the trains. Just east of the yard, the C&O Railway Heritage Center was hosting a Heritage Festival event, allowing the public to view historic pieces of railroad equipment up close. The center boasts the famed C&O 484 No. 614 and other C&O equipment and architecture, such as an EMD GP7 locomotive, passenger cars, a replica depot and tower, a freight house, working semaphore signals, cabooses, and a society store where books and other memorabilia are sold. Clifton Forge was an important place on the C&O Railway. It was where locomotives were serviced and readied for the trip west over the Allegheny Mountains, east over the Blue Ridge Mountains, and down the James River. There was a large shop facility for the overhaul and repair of locomotives. There was a large rail yard for classifying coal and other freight, a yard for less than carload freight, an icing facility, the main laundry facility for the railroad, a passenger coach yard, and the division headquarters for the region. It was all the things that comprised a railroad crowded into a small crescent of land next to the Jackson River, and an archetypal example of the American railroad. The center is also dedicated to preserving and telling the story of Clifton Forge, Virginia.
My name is Mac Goodwin, and I am a member of the Chesapeake and Ohio Historical Society here in Clifton Forge, Virginia on this sunny Sunday afternoon. We're in the middle of our Heritage Festival where we open the exhibits to the public and let them come in and look and see some of our premier railroading equipment that we have here. Right now, I am sitting in the engineer seat of the 614, a locomotive that was built for the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad by Lima Locomotive Works in 1948. That makes me about 6 years older than this locomotive. The Chesapeake and Ohio called this particular locomotive the Greenbrier. It was originally developed by the Northern Pacific in the early 1930s, and the developing railroad always gets the pleasure of naming the locomotive. Since it was the Northern Pacific, they called it the Northern Pacific, shortened to Northern. Step forward to a little later on in the 30s when the Chesapeake and Ohio built their first 484s, and they're a southern railroad, and the word northern kind of sticks in their craw. They couldn't, in all good consciousness, name a locomotive or call a locomotive the Northern. They picked the Greenbrier, a river that joins the New River around Hinton, West Virginia. And so the Greenbrier was born. It stayed the Greenbrier all the way up until this particular locomotive was painted in Greenbrier colors and named in honor of the owner of the Greenbrier Resort, Mr. Justice. I can't help but put that in. Some salient features on this locomotive. Notice that it has a smooth pilot. The reason for that was originally it was to be streamlined, aka the Norfolk and Western 600 class. That never came to be, but they liked the smooth lines of it, and this was the later version that was not delivered. This locomotive was not delivered until I said 1948. So it was never designed to be streamlined, but they liked the look of the smooth pilot. There's a coupler that is swing mounted behind here and swings out for use, and when it's not in use it is tucked away, presenting a smooth front. When you look up at this locomotive, you're presented with a clean, smooth front. The air pumps are hidden behind the gently curved guards there. The handrails are picked out in white. The number board is centered on the smoke box door. The headlight is mounted just above the radiator grills, and a bell is carried on her bonnet between her upper number boards. A smooth, clean look. A very pretty locomotive, if I do say so myself. This locomotive last saw service in 1999 or thereabouts, when it was an excursion service in New Jersey. Previously, it had been pulled out of service as a Chesapeake and Ohio rostered locomotive in the mid-50s and just stored. Ross Rowland purchased the locomotive and restored it to steam in the mid-80s, and then ran a series of tests with this engine actually in revenue service in the mid-80s, running in the New River Gorge. There are many famous pictures and videos of this engine working a coal train through the gorge in the middle of a snowstorm. Off to the right is J.D. Tower, which is an exact replica of the J.D. Tower, in fact, that was on the Chesapeake and Ohio Railroad back in the days of steam. Beyond that, you can see the sign for Clifton Forge Station. It is not the model of the Clifton Forge Station, but it is a model, exact full-size model of a standard Chesapeake and Ohio station. In fact, Amtrak has agreed to use that as the station, the official Amtrak station stop for Clifton Forge. On beyond, you can see a flat car that was restored by the volunteers here at the C&O Chesapeake and Ohio Historical Society. Then the Jeep 7 locomotive. Beyond that, you can see where the Clifton Forge yard curves around. If on the ride out of town, if you're headed in that direction and look to your left, you will see the stack for the powerhouse and the old coaling tower. And if you're quick, you can glimpse the old elevator that would take the crews that worked in the roundhouse and the car repair shops down to a tunnel that ran underneath the tracks and brought them up safely in the center of the yard, so they did not have to worry about crossing over the busy yard tracks. Here comes another one of the remotes switching the yard. There's no engineers in those engines. We're walking alongside the train that we have assembled here in Clifton Forge. Alongside of us is the diner. It hasn't been renamed yet, but it is in the works. You can even see the vase with yellow flowers in the window. Notice how they match the letterboard color. As we move along here, they have the air conditioning that is run off of ground power, and we continue moving down to the end of this car and notice that there's no entrance from this side. The diaphragm between the diner and this is a combi, a combination of coach and baggage car. The baggage doors are open in this case. We're going to keep moving. This was a car that was in actual service on the railroad in the middle of the transition era, even before then. It is supported on, both of the cars are supported on 6-wheel trucks. Come along and we'll go on board here if we can. We are standing in the vestibule of the combine now. Off to my left is a small bathroom that is used. And this was before the days of sanitary holding tanks. Moving forward, a water cooler, and then a small section of seats, and then forward the smoking section with 4 seats. Notice that if you're sitting here, you had best know your seatmates because you're going to be real close. These seats were very close together. If you turn around now, you can see the baggage section of this car, and where the baggage is stowed in a very similar way that it would have been in the 40s and 50s. There's a reward if anyone can identify that, whatever that is covered by that tarp. We have the milk cans, which are always present because it was an area that delivered milk and so on. The baggage doors. This was not a mail car, so there's not a mail crane on it, but moving forward you can see that there was quite a bit of room for baggage and stuff, and they did carry mail. Not all the time, but they did move mail from point A to point B. We're about to enter the dining room now, and as we enter, the air conditioning feels so wonderful. You can see that there's a picture of George Washington gracing the name train, and this diner is the Gadsby's Tavern, named after the tavern in Alexandria, Virginia. Very close to my home, by the way. The butler's pantry, the different tables, the arrangements, these are 4x4 across. We're going to move forward and you'll get to see, if we can keep taping that long, the kitchen area of this particular car. And I am always amazed when I see this and realize how much is done in such a little space. And they locked it on me. But you can see into the kitchen, the plates and dinner stacked, the stoves, and it is a tight space. They're working very hard in there to prepare food, and these are modern ranges, but you can imagine doing that on a coal-fired range. This caboose was built in 1949 in July, and it was one of the later cabooses built for the Chesapeake and Ohio. It was rebuilt from earlier wooden frame cabooses, and they all follow the same style. It is called the Northeastern caboose. The center cupola with the 2 square windows on it, a very standard design between all of the railroads. In fact, the steps were at one time tender steps, locomotive tender steps, and were adopted for use on the cabooses. It always brought up the end of the train, and as this is the end of the train, I guess this is the end of the video. Thank you so much for listening, and thank you so much for being a part of the Chesapeake and Ohio Historical Society.
After our tour with historian Mac Goodwin, we caught the westbound crude oil train KO 8905 with BNSF and Canadian Pacific Foreign Power to wrap up the day. The full version of Mac's 614 tour will be available in an upcoming YouTube video. The next day, we caught several trains on the Allegheny subdivision. the first of which would be eastbound intermodal train Q12207, which was emerging from the Big Bend Tunnel. This train can be seen once a week on this line. Big Bend Tunnel was the second tunnel constructed here, the first being the Great Bend in 1873, which is the alleged tunnel where John Henry beat the steam drill. The last train exited the Great Bend Tunnel in 1975 when the chassis system removed the double-tracked portion of railroad in the area. To commemorate the legend, a large statue that was once displayed above the tunnel on the mountain has been relocated to stand at the entrance of the tunnel, accompanied by a small railfan park and gazebo. The story of John Henry is told most famously in Johnny Cash's 1963 hit song, The Legend of John Henry's Hammer.
I can hoist a jack and I can lay a track. I can pick and shovel too. Ain't no machine can. That's been proved to you.
A few minutes later, and we spotted westbound empty coal train E50207 heading through the tunnel toward Hinton, West Virginia. Train traffic would be consistent throughout our stay in West Virginia, averaging one train every hour and a half, the majority being coal, with a few exceptions here and there. About 45 minutes after the previous train, in 6:45:07, empty coal train E50208 charges westward at track speed. On June 11th, we caught the westbound Amtrak Cardinal number 51 at White Sulphur Springs, West Virginia. The ancient former C&O signals the train was passing under are due for replacement this summer, and maintenance of way crews are working hard to get the job done. Get your pictures while there's still time. Shortly after P-51 cleared the main line, loaded coal train U-22710 was permitted to head east. The two GEs in charge of this train struggle up the steep grade and make their battle known with the loud sound of their prime movers working their hardest. Five days later, on June 16th, CSX put a mountain railroading show on for our crew, throwing 6 trains our way. The first train was eastbound loaded grain train G89406, which was headed for Rocky Mountain, Virginia. Next, we caught hotshot empty coal drag T22810 at milepost 345, doing track speed up the steep grade. Later in the evening, we caught eastbound loaded train T72206 outside Hinton, West Virginia. Just as the rain began to fall at the Hinton Amtrak station, loaded coal train T67610 slowly makes its way east. The train was headed by a former Conrail C40-8W locomotive. A half hour later, at Herzog Maintenance of Way train WO8807 is given permission to proceed east. Amtrak Cardinal Service train P51 would be our next and final train that we caught that day. Our last and final train along the Allegheny subdivision would be a grade 1. Filmed at the same location, we spotted grade train G87813 with 3 Union Pacific locomotives for power and 1 awesome engineer. The middle unit was former Southern Pacific-9, number 6394, still soldiering on in original Southern Pacific paint. Thank you for watching Delay and Block Productions. If you like this video, please subscribe to our YouTube channel.